my life changed so quickly at such a young age that it's like, I almost don't know who I was before that, if that makes sense. I remember they called us on the Saturday night, quite late at night, the management team, and they were like, oh, it's going to be front page of every newspaper tomorrow. All of the newspapers were like, Joe McElderry, I'm gay, this, that, and the other. And I could see as I walked in, people started to clock it was me. And people started clapping. I made a pact with myself when I came out of the thing. I was like, I'm not living by the boundaries of the industry anymore. I'm just going to, if I want to do something, if somebody tells us I can't do it, I'll find a way to do it myself.
Does Love Me Out Loud feel like a one-off? Is it a signal of more to come? Like, kind of what are you feeling right now?
I mean, I've got a really cool idea.
Hello and welcome back to the queerest podcast telling the fiercest stories. This is Queer Talker. I'm Ben Cicchetti. And a couple of weeks ago, I got sent early access to a song that has genuinely been on repeat ever since. I'm obsessed. The song is Love Me Out Loud. You'll get to hear it in all its glory this Friday. And the artist is my guest today, the winner of the X Factor 2009, Joe McElderry. Joe, welcome to Queer Talker.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fantastic. I'm so excited you're here. I'm so excited for the new music. It's fabulous.
Thank you. It's exciting. Yeah, it feels really fresh. I haven't released music for a long time. Well, like three or 4 years. And I got back in the studio back in February and just was like, no rules. There was no kind of plan. I fancied doing some writing. I hadn't written for ages just because I've been busy doing musical theatre and touring and just not in that kind of studio headspace. And we went in and I met Hattie, the co-writer and producer that I wrote it with. I actually originally went for a coffee and then she was like, well, I've got 3 hours now if you're free. And I was like, well, I've got a meeting at like 4 p.m. And we just whacked it out. It was just like really... but I think sometimes the best songs come from those, like, there's no kind of ulterior motive of it's just going with what you feel. So I'm glad you like it. I hope everybody else does as well.
They will. I'm obsessed. And we're going to talk about it a lot more.
Yes.
We're going to talk about your career, all the incredible moments you've had. But first, we'll play our little game of Queer Panic. These are rapid fire questions. You just respond with the first thing that comes to mind.
Okay.
Starting with, what was the first album you ever owned?
Well, it's actually, because I'm now in that age bracket, it was actually a cassette. And
Same. I'm feeling you.
It was Spice Girls, the greatest hits one. Was it Spice World? Yeah, Spice World.
Yeah. That's amazing. Okay, that's a great first album that I've owned. Who would be your dream music collaboration? Maybe the Spice Girls.
Definitely the Spice Girls. Always the Spice Girls. I always say it, so it's a bit boring because I think I've said it in every interview, but I'd love to collaborate with Beyonce. But somebody more recent who I really think is fantastic and killing it. I love Zara Larsson. What a girl. She's killing it. She's got great vocals and she provides the pop girly iconic moves and performance. Yeah, I love it. She's tapped into that kind of somebody who's really used social media to kind of create a whole world, which I think is if it's kind of the new blueprint of like when you're looking at something, I'm like, I admire that.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, you mentioned Beyonce. And when I told my husband I was interviewing you, he was like, you've got to ask him about the viral moment when you were in the crowd. Like, what was that like?
So I was not going to that show at all.
Okay.
And I was working and I'd gone back to Newcastle and I'd ended up, something had changed on my schedule. So I ended up having the Friday evening off. And I texted Angie, who was my manager at the time, and I said, is there any chance you could just text any of the promoters that that work on the show? And if there's any tickets, I'm happy to pay for them. But I'd love to go tonight now that I'm free this evening. So she texts back and she's like, I've managed to sort you 2 tickets. And me and my cousin jumped in the car, drove to Manchester. And when we got there, we were in like them she has them like Beyonce fan zones, like where all the special guests are. And I was like, oh, we're really being spoiled here. Like my elbow was on the stage. And she just flew over from the main stage to the B stage, started singing Love on Top and just turned around and put the microphone in my face. And
That's
I was
amazing.
like, and I was literally about to start hyperventilating. And then I had this, all of the mobile phones around, like, and then also I could sense quite a lot of people in the arena had clocked it was me because everyone was cheering and stuff. And I was like, you get your SHIT together. I don't know if you're allowed to swear on here.
This is a moment.
Yeah, I was like, "Get it together and give some good vocals here. This is not a time to be a fangirl." So I threw a little riff in there, and I was like, "Yeah, well, let's make this a moment." But I
Yeah.
was so happy after that. It was incredible.
Yeah, it was awesome. Okay, I completely sidebarred us.
Mm.
So back to Queer Panic. What is your favorite queer movie or TV show?
I mean, do you know, I was just talking about one the other day, and it's quite a strange one to say because it's so sad and horrible, but was so well done was It's a Sin.
Oh,
I was just
so good.
talking about it the other day with a friend of mine because I did a cover of it at a gig I was doing, and we were talking about the version. I did the Ollie Alexander kind of zooped up version, and we were talking about how, you know, that wasn't that long ago, and how,
Yeah,
like how informative it was for the younger generation to know how far we have come. We've still got a long way to go, but I think, horrific times that our older generation lived through.
yeah. No, I agree. Russell T Davies is such a voice for
And
the
a
queer
visionary,
community.
a visionary.
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, we've mentioned you competed and won the X Factor in 2009.
Yeah.
Looking back, what's your favorite performance from the show?
We did a really cool version of Could It Be Magic? And
Mm,
it was, I remember at the time, it was Brian Friedman, the choreographer, and he did this whole like picture where the dancers were all in the
yeah,
picture and they all came out of and I remember like thinking, this is like, it was like the first time I was like, oh, I feel like a pop star here. This is like really cool. um, and then I think another one that I'm kind of became the moment for me, and I think also became the turning point on the show where it kind of changed people's perception. They're like, oh, he could really win this now. Was probably Don't Let the Sun Go Down on Me. That was the
mm,
kind of moment where I feel like everything shifted for us. Before that, I was known as kind of the consistent kind of like underdog, and I was just always kind of consistent, but I don't think people saw us as a winner. And then when I did that performance, I think that was when it kind of shifted for me. So I always owe that song a lot.
yeah.
Yeah, stuff performed it, for and obviously I got to sing it with George Michael, which was
I
incredible.
know. What was that moment like? Again, I'm going to sidebar us. Like, what was that moment like? George Michael's such an icon and
Yeah.
such a huge part of the community. Like, what was it like performing with him on stage? The before, the in the moment, and then the after.
So I grew up listening to all of his music. So like I suppose for somebody like me, I would probably been too young to at that point in time to kind of realize his impact, if you know what I mean. But
Mm,
because my mum is she is the biggest George Michael fan. I grew up with all of his music, listening to it. So I knew all of his songs. I
yeah,
knew what he'd done. I'd seen the music videos. Like I was well educated on how much of an icon he was. And when they told us he was coming on the show, I found out quite last minute because I think they were obviously working behind the scenes to get him on the show. But you could just feel that you could feel that air in the building of like, I don't think they could quite believe he'd agreed to come on X Factor because
yeah,
we all love X Factor, but it's not the
yeah,
most musically credible show. So I think to get somebody like that to agree to come on, they were like, oh, this is big. And you
yeah,
could feel that in the room. And he hadn't done anything for he'd been out of the spotlight for quite a few years. It was the first TV performance he'd done in ages. So you could feel the kind of, and I was just like, what the hell? Like, what is my life? But he was so lovely, so caring, so giving. He gave all of the big notes of the song to me and just give a load of advice and just really humble and down to earth
mm,
and just like just a really kind person. And
yeah,
like he spent the time, he realized how big of a moment it was for me, and he didn't make it kind of uncomfortable, or he was just like, yeah, we're going to smash it. It's going to be great. And you sing all the high notes because this is your moment. And yeah, I can't say enough nice things about him. And I think
that's amazing.
for me, it's, I know, and I hope this comes across in the right way, but I think it's like, I really hate this thing that we don't truly celebrate somebody until they're not here anymore. Because
Yeah,
of course he had an incredible career, but now people speak about him and say how much of a visionary he was and how much of an incredible producer and songwriter and lyricist and I'm like, we should do that when people are alive. Like,
yeah.
it's yeah. And I know he had an amazing career, but the love that he receives now is lovely to see. But yeah, it's such a miss to the industry.
Yeah. And I think even like for our generation, like because I was born post Wham, so it wasn't
Yeah.
something where I was like massively aware of that. I was aware of more of his solo work. Like there was a Netflix documentary on Wham, and so seeing the impact they had. So I agree with you with that celebrating of people like that have had such huge impacts. But it's doing it whilst they're around to kind of to receive their flowers, I think is really important as well.
Yeah. And also, growing up in a time, talking about like what we are just saying about it's a sin. Growing up in a time and being authentically yourself in a time where
Yeah.
it wasn't possible always to do that is like that takes some balls to be able to do that on the level and the scale that he did it. And with
Yeah.
the whole thing with the outside music video, turning something that could have been like, what people would be like, well, this is career ending, and turn it into one
Yeah.
of the most iconic music videos, like that
100%.
people still talk about now. I'm like, that
Yeah.
clever man, clever man.
Yeah. Genius, genius. Okay, final of our Queer Panic questions. How would you describe for all of our listeners who are gonna get to hear it on Friday, Love Me Out Loud in one word?
Oh, one word. Okay.
One word.
I first thing that came was just disco.
Yeah,
Yeah, would
I
you
feel that.
agree?
I feel that. I feel
I
that
was gonna
100%.
say I was gonna say camp because I think it is
Okay.
camp as well, but
It's
I,
super queer, super disco.
I'm gonna go. Yeah, I'll go. Let's go queer disco. Yeah,
Queer disco. I love
yeah.
that. I love that. And we're going to talk about it a little bit more because there's an interesting tension to the song, which I love, but we will definitely get into that a little bit
Mm,
later on. Because for many of us, we first met you through the X Factor, right?
mm.
Who was Joe McElderry before that? Like, what should we know about you as a child teenager to understand you today, but also the you that kind of stepped into that audition room in 2009?
Well, I think I was kind of. What I always think is funny is that when you end up doing a job like this, and it's like your personality becomes, and I would imagine a lot of people will agree with this. Like you do become an exaggerated version of your own personality. Certainly on stage, I think it's like it's not an alter ego, but I do get that when I watch other people's interviews and things, and they're like, sometimes I have to switch into an alter ego because you do sometimes have to detach from yourself to like
Yeah.
get to a show, or it's a funny kind of it's really hard to explain. I hope I'm explaining it well, but I suppose like I was probably just who I am was very similar in terms of my personality. I was a lot shyer,
Hmm.
and I was I was obsessed with pop music. I was obsessed with girl bands and pop bands and steps, and like I was I was like a pop fangirl
Yeah.
basically. So
We
then
all were.
and I loved X Factor, and I used to watch it avidly every year. So then to kind of step into that world, it's so hard for me like to even think back to that time because it my life changed so quickly at
Yeah.
such a young age that it's like I almost don't know who I was before that, if that makes sense. Because
Yeah.
it I've done this longer than I kind of lived before that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's strange. It's a strange space to live in with that. But yeah, I would say I was very similar in the sense of I was fun and happy, but I think definitely a lot shyer.
Okay.
Yeah,
And where were you? I'm super curious because as you went on to the X Factor, I'm curious as to where you were in your own journey because you were so young, as you say,
yeah,
and then suddenly you're being watched by millions of people. So
yeah.
where were you, if you don't mind me asking, in your personal journey at that point? How much of you yourself had you figured out, like as far as your sexuality?
Not a lot, really. I'd had like one brief, like where brief experience with a guy that I'd kind of went on. I think I'd went for Fernando's, like that was it. And
Classic.
I remember, and nothing else had happened. And I remember thinking like that was the biggest thing in the world. And I was like, what does this mean? And all of
Yeah.
that. And then obviously went on X Factor and it didn't have time to, I was not out to any of my family or friends. I hadn't had those conversations with anybody. And then obviously you get fast tracked into this world where everybody's kind of looking to you for all of these answers and going, well, how many girlfriends have you had and how many partners?
Mm,
I'm thinking, I don't know the answers to these questions. Like what?
yeah.
Because I genuinely didn't. And I think there's a misconception that like I went on there kind of fully knowing that I was gay and that I kept it all a secret. And which, if I did do that, would be my business and would also be absolutely
Yeah.
fine. It's also
100%.
important to note. But I didn't. I didn't know who I was, and I remember going into the round table interviews with the journalists at the time, because we were still in that kind of heavy tabloid era of like, you'd sit with all the journalists and they would hammer you with like the most personally intrusive questions. And it was just normal. It was like, that
Yeah.
was. And you'd have a PR person sitting in the corner of the room. And I remember coming out of one of the rooms and thinking, whoa, like this is not what I'm used to. This is not like, and you don't really get any training for that. You're just kind of thrown into it. And I remember coming out of there and thinking, oh, that was odd. Don't really know how to feel about that. And then, the whirlwind of the show went on. I won the show. I went straight onto the X Factor tour. And I think around the time of the X Factor tour, we were traveling the country and, all the dancers were on the road and everything. And I remember being like, I'm attracted to men. Like that is my attraction. I could start to kind of, and I've started to feel really comfortable with that and be like, oh, that I think that's who I am. But again, you're still navigating this kind of thing of like, I'm in the public eye. How do I deal with this? How do I approach this? And then I met like my first partner that I ever had, and then as soon as I met him, I was like, all right, yeah, okay. Like I know who I am, and pretty much within a matter of weeks, I told all my family and friends, and obviously then had to do the kind of whole coming out thing publicly, which is a whole other ball game and a whole other level of maybe embarrassment is not the right word, but I only say embarrassment because I was a teenager. So if you imagine how you feel internally as a teenager in general, talking about anything to do with that, whether you're gay, straight, or whatever, add that into like all your family and friends and people who don't know you're reading that in a newspaper. I was like, oh my God, this is not, this is not how I imagined this would go down. And me being me, I didn't think it would be big news. It sounds ridiculous to say that, but I think when it's you that's living it, I just thought, oh, it'll be a little kind of column in the 3 a.m. section of the Daily Mirror or the Sun or whatever. And I remember they called us on the Saturday night, quite late at night, the management team, and they were like, oh, it's going to be front page of every newspaper tomorrow, just to make you aware. Because you used to get like a warning if you were going to make like a front page news story. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, like, and so I was living in a flat in London. My mum was in London with us. And I got up the next morning and I remember thinking, I just want to pull the quilt over my head and just like this room. And I remember she came in. She's like, right, get up. She's like, call all your friends, call all the dancers off the X Factor tour. She's like, we're having a coming out party. We're going to M&S. We're getting some burgers. She was like, we're not making this like a ridiculous thing. We're having a party. And we had a coming out party. We sat in the garden. We had a few drinks and I was living in Kensington. I'd been put in a flat in Kensington. I walked along to the M&S right near Harrods, how bougie. And and I walked in to get all of the stuff, and all of the newspapers were like, Joe McElderry, I'm gay, this, that, the other. And I could see as I walked in, people started to clock it was me.
Yeah.
And people started clapping. And I was like, they were like, well done, congratulations, and a round of applause. And it was a really it was a really lovely moment. And at the time I felt really vulnerable and a bit like embarrassed by it all. And just like, I was like, oh, I wish I didn't have to kind of deal with this. And, but there was so many lovely moments along the way of that. And the reaction was, the reaction was wonderful from people. So I was very fortunate. I'm very aware that not everybody gets that experience. So it was a crazy time, but there was a lot of positives from it.
Yeah, it's so interesting, right? Because I think you talk about, front page of every newspaper. It's so easy now in the era we're in today to forget how huge the X Factor was. Literally everyone watched it. It was, it was that show everyone watched and got behind as we headed into kind of, and always leaded up to Christmas. There was always that excitement around it. Talk to me just about the experience of being on the X Factor. And when you look back on it now, is there a moment that you find yourself reflecting on the most, or a moment that really kind of takes you back? If you saw it on YouTube, saw it on TikTok, that takes you back to that time?
I think like I think what's always important to tell people is that when we did the show, we almost lived in this like false reality bubble of we were in an X Factor house and there was people outside the house and paps and all of that kind of stuff. But beyond that, we went in a car every day to the studio or a rehearsal, and straight back to the house. So we were so busy filming the show
Yeah.
that we weren't ever around the public to kind of see the impact of what was going on. And I remember my mum and dad were coming down every week to the studio, and they were like, Joe, it's crazy in the Northeast. Like, your pictures are like in everybody's houses. You're on the town hall. And I remember, I think when people tell you things like that, you don't, unless you see something like that, you don't
Yeah.
really, and also we weren't really yet into the social media era. So it wasn't like you could go on TikTok and see what was going on. It was, Twitter
Yeah.
had just come about. So we were a little bit like not exposed to it, if that makes sense. You know, you knew on a Saturday night and on a Sunday in the studio, and we knew obviously it was in the newspapers and all of that kind of stuff. But it wasn't until I went home for my homecoming to do the kind of the
Yeah.
pre-final homecoming thing. And I was like, oh, wow, this is big. Like, this is, they're chasing the cars down the street and there's like thousands of people outside my house. Like, and I was like, this is crazy. And it took me a long time to adjust to that. I think people underestimate people just see the kind of glitz and glamour of it all and go, oh, well, you must be living your best life. And I'm like, it's a really overwhelming thing to be 18 years old and
Yeah.
everybody in the country know who you are, and you actually don't know how to deal with that. And you have no kind of tools or equipment. It's just like you're learning on the job. So I think for the first 3.5, 4 years of my career, it was the only way I can liken it to is just like throwing a bouncy ball off the wall. Like you're just bouncing from one wall to the next all the time. And it's like album, tour, this is happening, this happens, something in the press happened. You have a media kind of storm of something going on. And it was really intense. But at the same time, I learned everything that I needed to learn about the industry. It was like a crash course in, you know, records, recordings, touring, everything. Like it was, and it equipped me with the skills to have a long career. I think,
Yeah.
even though it's a very strange time.
Yeah. No, I can only imagine. I can't imagine that moment when, Dermot says you've won. Like that moment when it all happens. Like, I'm curious to that moment, like the moment when it said you're the winner of the X Factor and this is this huge moment. But then also you wake up the next morning. Like, I'm always curious about the next day, right? You've had this experience.
Yeah.
As you say, you've been almost locked in this bubble for weeks at this point.
Yeah.
You've won. The huge achievement. Then you wake up the next day. Like, what's that feeling as you wake up in the morning?
Well, you don't even.
Maybe hungover.
Well, no, I won the show, and you go into this room after you win the show, and they're like, "This is your management company. This is your record label. This is your PR person." You're just handed a team of people, which is the strangest, most abnormal thing. Now, when I think back to that, I'm like, that's such a strange thing, and and then they were like, they have a schedule. You're at work. It's like, it's not. I think people think it's like, oh, you went home and you had a big party with your family. I'm like, no, I went on a full blown promotional trail to promote the climb. It was like,
yeah,
I literally was handed a 6-page document, and it was like, at 4 a.m. tomorrow morning, we're going to pick you up. You're going to GMTV, which was the Good Morning Britain of the time. And you're performing at 6 o'clock in the morning on the show. You're going to then perform on Lorraine. You're then going to This Morning. You're then going to an album signing. We're then flying to Newcastle. You're going to do an album signing in Newcastle. We're flying back to London. You're going to this. You're performing at that. Like, everything is mapped out within an inch of its life. So it's you don't really have any time to adjust to anything, and you're on the trail. And I remember being sat in a chauffeur driven, like, big Mercedes car, and there was like me, my mom, and the record label and stuff, and I was doing press interviews on the phone, and I was falling asleep in the middle of the
God.
because it was just such an intense schedule. You're just trying to get sleep, and I was literally like dropping off to sleep because of this schedule. But and obviously we had my first single was the whole like Rage Against the Machine campaign, which was that took the press attention up another level, because everyone wanted me on the show to talk about that because it was so topical. And so, like, every day extra stuff would be coming in, and we were just working and working and working. And I remember went to Radio 1 on the Sunday to find out if it had gone to number 1 or not. And I got in the back of a car. I went in, obviously found out it hadn't gone to Christmas number 1. It went to number 1 like the following week, I think it was.
Yeah.
And I got in a car, that day, and I put the seat down in the car and I passed out all the way back to Newcastle. And I woke up at like 4 o'clock in the morning and was just, I remember going into my house where I obviously had grown up, and it was just, the silence was so loud. Like,
Mm,
it was just like, I remember going back in and the calmness, and it was like, I've not had this calm for like
yeah.
6 months. It was a really strange feeling. And then we went skiing as a family, went on family ski trip. And so that was like literally the next day we went to the airport to fly up to wherever we are going. And I remember 2 days later just being sat on a ski lift in the mountains, and like going up the hill, and it was just silent, like,
Yeah.
and just peace and calm around. And I remember just thinking, what the F has just happened? Like, what? I remember, like, and I was like laughing, like laughing out loud on this ski lift, thinking, what, like, if somebody had have told you that was all going to just happen in the space of 6 months, you would have laughed them out the door. It was
Yeah.
the strangest feeling ever. And I don't
Yeah.
think that ever becomes normal. I think it's just, it becomes part of your life. But I still have that now where, I've done it for 17 and a half years, but I still have those moments where I'm like, wow, like, I'm really doing this as a job. Like, this is, that I don't think that ever leaves you. You get used to things, but I still have moments now and again where you play a gig or you do your own tour, and you think, God, like, I'm actually doing this. This is still happening. It's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah. It's amazing. And then I have to talk to you about Wide Awake because
Mm.
I was obsessed with that album, still
Oh,
am,
I'm
if I'm
glad.
honest.
I'm glad.
Ambitions is such a tune. And then I have like Real Late Starter is like one of my favorite songs on the album. Like, I just think it's such a hit.
Great song.
But there are so many incredible songs, Fahrenheit and so on and so forth. And there was this kind of like pop, kind of almost Scissor Sisters vibe
Yeah.
to it at
Yeah.
times. How did you feel about the album at the time as it was coming out? And then when you look back on it now, like, how do you feel about it looking at it now?
Well, I think firstly it was a great pop album.
Yeah.
I think I can say that because I didn't write any of the songs, so I can take the you always feel weird saying that about your own songs. But I'm
Yeah.
like, but I do. I think there was some banging pop songs on there,
Yeah.
and like Ambitions came through the door really late in the game of recording the album, and it kind of shifted the whole feel of the album because of Ambitions. It changed the whole direction into that kind of falsetto-y kind of synth sound, and we then kind of found a load of other songs that matched that. And I loved the album. It was such a shift from, I think, what people were expecting from me. Certainly,
Mhm.
like a certain audience that had voted for us on the show and stuff. But I'm really proud of that album, and those songs have stood the test of time. When we do them in the shows, I performed them last week at a festival, and you can feel the energy goes in the room. People
Yeah.
love. They're good songs. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm proud of that album. It's so strange now, and hindsight is a lovely thing because kind of it, the chart position that it got back then, I think it went to like number 3, which like at the time the press were like, "Oh, he's a flop and he's a failure," and I'm like, now people would only dream of having a top 3.
Yeah.
It's so insane, but because we were part of that X Factor, like
Yeah.
um conveyor belt where if you just didn't have a number 1, you were just continuously classed as a flop, which was
Yeah.
ridiculous, And but like they were like, oh, it's had like lackluster chart. And I'm like, well, I don't think a top 3 album is lackluster chart success. But you're like, but okay, if that's the narrative we're going down, like,
Yeah.
so it was funny. It was like it was painted as like certainly that for me behind the scenes. I never felt that, and I never kind
No.
of took that on. But it's so interesting, isn't it, that where we are now with chart, the way the charts work and stuff. It's such a different time. I'd love to know how it would do in this era, because I think it's like it would fit
Yeah.
well in this kind of era of music now.
Yeah, I think it would. I think, I was obsessed with it at the time, and I thought it was such a, as you say, it wasn't necessarily what people were expecting, I
Yeah,
think, coming out of it, but it just worked so well. Your voice worked so well on it. The songs worked so well. It's one of those albums that I think is quite rare that you can listen to start to finish. Like, I often will listen to an album, there's
yeah,
always songs I'll skip. That it's a start to finish kind of album.
yeah,
And obviously, you've moved through so many different types of music, from
yeah.
pop, you've done classical, you've done theater, film soundtracks, Christmas, and then obviously now Love Me Out Loud with this kind of big disco energy. Where do you think your voice is most at home in kind of those genres? Or is there a particular world that brings you the most joy when you're singing it?
Do you know what I love about I think live is where my voice thrives, like
Yeah.
in a live concert setting, and I love the kind of ability of like I really enjoy the ability to merge completely different genres of music, and I've had to do that because of the audiences of the different styles of albums that I've done. Like we do have to do a section of the show where it's the classical crossover stuff, and there might be 50% of the audience that aren't there to hear that. And it's like the joy in trying to merge all of that together is actually really fun, and it keeps it really fresh. And but I think I love pop music. I'm a huge, huge fan of pop music. And I don't believe I'm a real kind of stickler on this of that. We're conditioned certainly in the music industry, and not so much now, but still a little bit of like you can't do whereas if you're a classical singer, you can't sing pop music. And if you're a pop
Mm,
music, well, you can't do musical theatre and then pop. And I'm like, yes, you can. If
yeah.
that's what you want to do and people want to hear you do that, yes, you can. And
Yeah.
I'm very much like, I really fought against that in the early days and I still fight against that now. Not that it's much of a fight now because I just do what I want.
It's a nice place to be.
No, but like I really kind of I was like, yes, you can. Like if you do it properly and you do it right, you can do that. Like that's totally fine. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's so I think people who would listen to me voice would probably say that like the kind of musical theatre and classical um space is like my voice sits like people go, oh God, like when you sing that classical music, it's like a different person. And
Yeah.
people tell us that all the time. But I don't know, like I think give me a good pop song and like I can belt my tits off.
And it's the joy of music, right? Like it is so subjective, right? And like all
Oh,
of us have different opinions, like, and some of us are drawn to certain music. And that's the joy about what you're able to do is because you can reach so many different people.
yeah,
But I'm curious for you personally, like we talked about the X Factor, we talked about your albums coming out. When in your own journey did you start to feel kind of authentically just because you also mentioned the fact that you are kind of putting on a bit of a persona when you step onto a
yeah.
stage, but in yourself, when did you feel like this is authentically me? I now feel comfortable. This is authentically me. And I can just bring this to everything I do.
It probably sounds really ridiculous to say, right? But I would say when I turned 30, and
Hmm.
it sounds like that, probably people probably like, God, that's like, 10, 11 years into your career. But I think we went into lockdown, but not long before I turned 30, and I'd stopped for the first time in like I'd been on a treadmill of like always do, which was wonderful. I'm not complaining about that. Um, of working all the time. And for the first time in my life, after about 10 years, I went back to Newcastle and I was stuck in my house for 4 years, like everybody else,
Yeah.
I did little bits and pieces of work, but nowhere near on the scale that I was used to doing. And I remembered thinking in lockdown, when I come out of this, I am going to do what I want to do and I'm going
Mm,
to do it my way and I'm going to do it like I'm going to always choose the things that make us feel great. And because I was like, we've had all of this time to sit in the house and everything. I love performing and I love what I do. But I was like, my motto is if it's something that I want to do and I can have fun with it and I can like, I'm going to do it, you know?
yeah.
And I'm not going to put the, and I think also lockdown was a great time for artists. Not that I'm trying to make light of anything to do with the pandemic, because obviously we
Yeah.
would love to have never had to have gone through that. But lockdown was a really interesting time for artists, where I think we realized that if you strip all of the stuff away, you still can connect with people via social media without, you know, big marketing teams involved in all of
Yeah.
these things. So it took the fear out of the work in the sense of that you're like, oh yeah, I can do that. Like I know how to do that now. I've learned, not that I ever want to be a marketing manager or anything like that, but meaning like if it actually comes to it, like
Yeah.
I've learned how to do all of those things. So I made a pact with myself when I came out of the thing. I was like, I'm not living by the boundaries of the industry anymore. I'm just gonna, if I want to do something, if somebody tells us I can't do it, I'll find a way to do it myself. Or
Yeah.
I'll go, okay, that's fine. I'll find somebody else that wants to do that. I'm going to do it anyways. So I think probably like me 30s, I turned 30 in lockdown, and I was just like, I want to have fun and I want to enjoy, and I want to make people feel good. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think if I don't feel good, they're not going to feel good. Therefore, it's got to feel good for me. Do you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
say that it's not to say that anything that I did previous to that didn't make us feel good, but the music industry is a business, and sometimes you're in situations where like it's X, Y, and Z, and it's a map to get to certain points and things. And of course, that still stands in certain situations. But I think for me now, it's like I'm all about like creating great fun moments for people. It's like it should be fun. Do you know what I mean?
100%. Yeah. And it is fun. It's such, as I think about it, because obviously we've teased it enough probably at this point. Because I talk about fun, Love Me Out Loud. It's such a fun song. I mentioned
Yeah,
I got to hear it a little bit early. What I love about it is, as we've kind of said, it's got this like big disco sound, but
yeah,
actually, when you listen to the lyrics, it carries something else. I gave you everything I had. We're like strangers in the crowd, but it's simple when no one else is around or no one's around.
yeah,
It could have easily been a ballad, right? Like the lyrics could have easily been a ballad. So,
yeah.
what kind of is interesting to me is then the tension, right? Because you've turned it into this kind of like danceable queer pop hit. So, what was the spark behind that song? Was that kind of dynamic something you thought about? And then kind of why did it feel like now is the right moment to release it?
So when we went into the studio with the song, um, I said to Hattie, who I wrote it with, I said, "What I love." She was like, "Who do you like?" Which sometimes happens quite a lot. You go into sessions with writers. They're like, "What are you listening to at the moment? What makes you feel good?" And I'd recently gone back through all of Robin's catalog of music. I'd gone on like a like a 10K runner, and I put like a greatest hits playlist on Spotify of her songs. And as I was running along, I was like, what you've just said, basically, I was like, some of these lyrics are like heartbreaking lyrics, and it's got
Yeah.
this big synthy like dance like thing over the top. But you listen to the lyrics, and it's like about the horrendous situations that you end up in with relationships and situationships or whatever. So when I went in with Hattie, I said, and I think Jessie Ware does it that really well as well. Um, so I said, I really want to write a song like about, you know, the kind of conflict of heartbreak where and where it all goes wrong with somebody, but like that thing where you're falling for someone, that they're such the wrong person for you, but you just can't help it. And you're in the chaos of it. And then the chorus kind of is the shift of, is like what I would say is kind of your own inner monologue of the frustration of wanting that person to be where you want them to be, and
Yeah.
kind of willing them at the last hurdle to just be able to turn it around, and like, and go, come on, like just love us out loud and let's just do it. Like, let's make it happen.
Yeah.
And it's that kind of push and pull of like knowing that they're the worst person for you, but you kind of still want them, and
Yeah.
so like we kind of started with that concept, and then Hattie came up with this kind of like synthy sound over the top, and it honestly it flowed very very naturally. It's to how we got to the song. We were like we're just bouncing off each other really quickly. But I'm glad that it comes across like that, because that is
Yeah.
absolutely what we wanted to create with it. And it's like it's flipping the heartbreak to the disco. It's like heartbreak disco, and it was inspired by like Jessie Ware, Dua Lipa, Robin, those kind of big dance tracks, but with sad lyrics, basically depressing.
But that is the crazy tension, right? Because the lyrics are slightly depressing, but the song is like genuinely, I can't wait for people to hear it because I've had it on repeat. And it's just like, it's such a song, especially for like the summer, especially because obviously you're releasing it during Pride, which just
Yeah,
has this kind of like queer vibe to it. And
yeah.
obviously I've seen you tease a few things on social leading up to this. Is there like a video that's going to come with this?
We've
Like what's
gone
the kind of whole thing?
we've gone all out with the video. I mean, I can probably talk about it because it was all over TikTok. There was some videos of us filming it outside, so I think people have seen it anyways. But it's set in the Heartbreak Laundrette. So you take your emotional baggage to the laundrette to wash out the stubborn emotional damage of your ex partner, or whatever you want to call that. And yeah, it's going into the laundrette with your baggage, and other people are in there, and then we kind of flip it to a virtual reality where the laundrette turns into this kind of like dance club party. And my grandma stars in the music video. So she's the laundrette owner that then turns into the DJ. So she takes it.
That's amazing.
She starts as like the Dot Cotton character, and then she
Yeah.
takes it to the when it hits to the dance bit, she's full glasses, big glittery hat, fur coat, the lot. She's bringing the look. Yeah. So and we've got choreography in there. There's like a full dance break in the video, and I wanted to make like a really fun pop video to go with it. I felt like the song deserved that, so
Yeah.
we worked with the production company, and it was originally going to be set in a forest. The original idea was to kind of do Into the Woods, like kind of meets like disco and the kind of the chaos of like I kind of wanted to create the imagery of, like running through this like forbidden forest and kind of being lost in your own head and
Mm.
thoughts. And then we kind of thrashed a few ideas around, and somebody suggested a laundrette, and I was like, well, if we're going to do a laundrette, we've got to kind of tap into the kind of emotional baggage and all of that stuff. So yeah, it flipped to that, and I'm actually really glad we went with that, because I think it's a very different style concept video of what people will be expecting.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can't wait.
Yeah.
Cannot wait to see it. And I guess the obvious question, and maybe the one you won't want to answer, does Love Me Out Loud feel like a one-off? Is it a signal of more to come? Like, kind of what are you feeling right now?
I kind of made a pact with myself this year that I'm gonna put like new music out this year. So time scale wise, my plan is to hopefully do another 2 songs before the end of the year. But that's a big yeah. I've been
It's on the
really
record now.
yeah. I mean, I've got a really cool idea, which I won't say in case a songwriter's listening and steals it, because I think if I can pull it off, it'll be. I've got a really cool concept idea for another song that kind of merges like a really fun kind of musical theater thing, marrying it with pop and adding in a bit of opera and all of that kind of stuff. And I think if we can pull it off, it would be a really cool idea. So it's the first time in years that like I've had all of these. I haven't forced it either. It's like I think the reason I wanted to put this out is it just feels really natural at the minute, and it feels really easy, and just like, yeah, we're doing it. Like, let's put it out. And I haven't had that feeling for a while. So I was just like, I'm going with it, and I feel like my ideas are, I've got me kind of spark back with kind of making music, and I'm like, I'm on the train or I'm in the gym or I'm running, and I've got like ideas, and I'm stopping, I'm singing them into my phone. And I haven't done that for a long time. Not
That's amazing.
because anything bad's happened. I've just been really busy with other stuff. And, it's very easy in this industry to get distracted when you're just on a treadmill of a different style of work. And I've just got that bug back, and like just being on the video shoot again and like creatively being involved in all of that. Like, haven't done that for a few years, and it feels like I think again, like going back to where you were saying when you feel authentic, like I feel comfortable in those spaces now, like where I'm like, I know what I'm doing. I
Yeah.
know how to create those things. And obviously I've got great people that work around us, but I don't really have that fear anymore of being like, oh, can I do this? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Like, it's meant to be fun,
Yeah.
and I would love nothing more than this song to reach the absolute masses. But if it's just my fans that have followed my journey, love the song, then that's great also. It's like I don't really have any expectations on it. Like, I want everybody to love it, of course, but I'm
Yeah.
like, there's just a joy in the freedom of just doing what you want to do and making people feel good with it. It's like,
Yeah.
I'm just leaning into that.
I love that. And obviously we mentioned you're releasing it mid Pride, which is just
Yeah.
incredible, because I think Love Me Out Loud feels like such a song that I, and I'm sure lots of others, will want to dance to at Pride
Oh,
events. What for you does kind of like, what does that mean to you? Like, what does queer joy mean to you at kind of this stage of your life and your career, knowing that you are making songs that people in the LGBTQ plus community are going to love because they bring us that kind of queer joy?
I think it's just literally what you asked before. I think it's just queer joy is being able to authentically be yourself without any barriers or judgment or negativity towards who you want to be, and my motto is always, if you're being kind and you're living your life happy and you're not harming anyone, like, why are you pressed about it? Why are
Yeah.
people pressed about people just being who they want to be? So I think that is queer joy. It's like, Yeah, like I went to Mighty Hoopla a few weeks back, and you look around, and it's just you know, all different music styles, all different artists, and people just having the time of their life.
Yeah.
There's no fighting, there's no drama. It's just people in fantastically camp, outrageous outfits on a great time. Nobody is harming anyone. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And it's like, we were in the crowd. I was with some of my best friends, and Jay McDonald came on, and I put a video on TikTok, and we just like we were losing our minds, like in the just like having a great time, and that is what
Yeah.
life's about. Do you know what I mean? It's
100%.
like Jay McDonald singing J Ho. I'm like, let's go. This is what life's about.
Yeah. I'm so with you though. There were so those moments where you feel like that kind of sense of community joy. Like I got it, like we went to go and see Kylie last year and it
Yeah,
just felt like
I saw
everyone
that.
there was gay. It was
It's
amazing. It
amazing.
was so amazing. And then we were obviously at the British LGBT Awards together. And again, there was that feeling in the room of just queer joy, which I just think is amazing. And I love when we can get the community together like that.
Yeah, it's community. It's community spirit, isn't it? And that extends across like so many areas of life, but
Yeah.
certainly in the LGBTQ plus community, it's like it's such an important thing, and people like I said this about Mighty Hoopla. Actually, I was like, the energy just lifts everybody. It just
Yeah.
there's no negativity there. It is just energy that lifts and lifts and lifts and lifts, and by that energy, everybody just wanders around feeling great. It's
Yeah.
infectious. It's
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's what you want. And that is what that is, and it should always be that. And why people have a problem with that is just I'm just like, oh, live your life. Let
Yeah.
people live and live your life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of bringing joy, I can't let this podcast end without talking about your own podcast.
Yeah,
That's ridiculous with your
yeah.
grandma, which I just love. And it's amazing to hear that she'll feature in the music video as well. How did that come together? And then how special is it to have that with her and record that with her, spend that time with her and know you'll have that forever?
Well, I mean, what I will start by saying is she has completely stolen the limelight off us, well and truly. It is no longer about me anymore. Everywhere I go, the first thing people say, please tell us Grandma Hilda's here. I'm like, no, 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 but I'm here. Hi.
Hello.
Um, but we basically have. She's been on the road with me for years. She used to come on the road like a lot more back in the day, and she'd sell the merchandise. She'd be out on the desks at the front, and the fans of me and supporters of me who've followed my career for a long time have always known what an icon she is, and she's always had that draw with people. Like they want to be around her. She's kind of no nonsense, but she's just got a great personality. And then during lockdown, I had like loads of footage from being on tour buses over the years and just putting little bits out. And I started getting like loads of messages from people being, saying, "Oh, you should do something together." Anyways, we came up with the concept of the podcast. And if I'm being completely honest, I knew obviously a certain amount of people would love it because they follow my socials, but I did it to kind of capture our relationship and to have
Yeah.
a great memory for me, and to just spend that time together once a week. So we filmed 10 episodes 2 years ago, and she went viral on TikTok. Like everyone, we did a live show. It sold out in like 20 minutes, and we've done like 3 live shows since then. But she's just got a perspective on life. She's she's 92, first of all, but she's had some like real heartbreak in her life. She
Mm.
lost her husband, she lost her brother, she lost her mom and dad, both very young, and she lived through the war. But she's got this kind of no nonsense zest for life of like where you get back up and you always keep going. And it's like and I think people just they feel like they're listening to grandparents that they've lost. We get
Yeah.
loads of messages on the thing, people saying, I live in Australia and I really miss home, and I put it on and it's like hearing my grandma speak to us in my ear, and she's no longer here. But we just talk about topical things, and we put her on Tinder on one of the episodes and showed her what it's like dating apps, and she just thinks everything's ridiculous now. Like
Yeah.
everything that we do as the younger generation, she's just like, I mean, I don't understand any of it, but you just do. But what I was saying before, live your lives, have a great time. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. She's so amazing. And she's so like just, and I think you get to a certain point in your life, I'm sure, where she's just herself. Like she's just so authentically herself. I think
Yeah.
I literally a clip came across my feed the other day where it was like, she just couldn't name any of your songs. And I'm like, that's such a grandma thing to do. Like she'll know them all. She could probably sing them all, but she's just like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like,
And controversially hates the climb with a passion and has taught us on numerous occasions, hates the climb.
yeah.
You know, and I always go, well, I know, but Grandma, you're not singing that again, are you? And I'm like, I kind of have to. Like, I had a number one with it. I have to include it in the show. Oh God, why they pick that song? And I'm like, sorry, Miley. I love it. Doesn't matter what she thinks.
There you go. Okay, well, we started this conversation talking about your younger self. So let's revisit them a little bit. If you could go back 2009 and speak to Joe just as he walks into that audition room for the X Factor, what would you want him to know and what advice would you give him?
I think I would just say, just enjoy it. Because honestly, it all works out. And you might have times through your career where you think, what the hell is going on here? But trust the process, trust where it's taking you, trust where it's leading you, because there's always a rhyme and there's always a reason. Because I think I spent the early days of my career just worrying so much about what everybody thought. And in the grand scheme of things, it's like, it's meant to be fun. So enjoy it, ride the highs, ride the lows, because it's all part of the story.
I love that. I love that. Joe, thank you so much for coming on Queer Talker. But actually, more importantly, thank you so much for what you have done, right? You've brought us so much joy through your music, but also, again, going back to something you said right at the start, it's easy to forget how huge the X Factor was in the UK. And it's therefore easy to forget how big a moment it was when you came out. And you gave so many people the opportunity to see their stories reflected in you. You now sing songs that people can hear their love, their voices reflected in you. So thank you for all of that and everything you bring to the community. And just thank you so much for being on Queer Talker with me today.
My pleasure. And thank you.